right here at the harbor. And right behind me, you see the Mayflower, the original Mayflower II, the Mayflower II, which was a ship that was built in 1957. It's a replica of the original Mayflower that, of course, brought the Pilgrims here to Plymouth back in 1620. Now, I think there's a lot of reverence toward the Mayflower, and I understand that, but I think there are a lot of misunderstandings also about the Mayflower. The Mayflower was not a ship that was owned by the Pilgrims. It was a merchant ship, a cargo ship, and packed with 102 passengers, of course, that were coming here. And this was all a contract. It was just for business reasons. In fact, in April of 1621, as the weather got better, the Mayflower returned to England, never to come back to America again. And just continued its work as a cargo ship. Now, on board the Mayflower also, which is kind of interesting, of course, is you had the Pilgrims, but you also had about half of them that were referred to as strangers, who were not part of this religious group that was coming to the New World. They were just businessmen. They were hoping to make some money. And so it was a joint venture, and that was how the Pilgrims were able to make the trip in the first place. Now, this Mayflower II, of course, this replica was built to be as much like the original Mayflower as possible, including the fact that it is a working ship. Like they can still sail it. It has sailed across the Atlantic before, this replica of the Mayflower. So it's a very impressive replica, even though it is just a replica. So anyway, you can actually get a pass here. It's called the Heritage Pass. It's, in the mid 40s as far as price as of, right now in 2024, and you can go on the Mayflower II. You can also go to the Plimoth Patuxet villages, which are a replica of the original village and also of the Native American village nearby, some of that as well. And that is right here in Plymouth, a couple of miles away. And that's done with actors who are in character, who tell you about their adventures and what they're up to, and they pretend that it's the year 1620, and it's pretty entertaining and really interesting to see how they lived way back in the 1620s here in this area. And then also just over here, you see the original Plymouth Rock. It is housed under this colonnaded canopy. It's very fancy, and it is, of course, the original Plymouth Rock, sort of. There was no mention of a Plymouth Rock until more than 100 years after the Pilgrims came. So in the 1700s, there was talk about the rock, and this rock became the rock that supposedly the Pilgrims landed at. Although, like I said, the original Pilgrims never mentioned anything about a rock. But it has become very much a symbol of the Pilgrims, and it's been moved a few different times. Some claim that that's the spot where the Pilgrims actually landed, but really we don't know exactly where it was. It was somewhere in this general vicinity, probably somewhere within my sight line here. But anyway, it was moved a few different times, and eventually in I think it was 1880, they stamped it with the 1620 that's now on it, very famously. But it is a cool landmark to see, and at least has been reverenced as the Plymouth Rock going all the way back to the 1700s. One other kind of really cool thing that's here in the vicinity is the statue of Massasoit. Massasoit, of course, was the leader of the Wampanoag Indians that were the ones that the Pilgrims met, and that really, without them, the Pilgrims would have never survived. They absolutely needed the Wampanoag Indians, and there were a couple of specific ones that were part of the Patuxet and the Pokanoket tribes. You had Samoset and Squanto, who both spoke English, Squanto especially well, and he was a big part of helping them. And part of the reason that they ended up settling here is it was a great harbor, but it's also great land that was already cleared, and that's because this is where Samoset's tribe had been living until they were all wiped out by a plague. And in the meantime, he wasn't there because he had been taken as a slave and back to Europe and was living in England for a while before coming back here to his homeland. And then just a few years later is when the Pilgrims arrive, or a short time later. So anyway, that statue of Massasoit is by Cyrus Dallin. He's a very famous sculptor, especially of Native Americans. He's done a lot of those, but he's done a lot of other famous sculptures, including the Paul Revere equestrian sculpture in Boston, the very famous one of him doing his midnight ride. And then Cyrus Dallin, another very famous sculpture of his, is the angel Moroni that sits atop the Salt Lake Temple. That's the temple of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Salt Lake City. So very famous sculptor, and a great sculpture of Massasoit, the chief of the Wampanoag. So Plymouth is great. There's one other site that we're going to see today that's part of that Heritage Pass. You get the Mayflower II, you get the Plimoth Patuxet Village, and then you also get to see the grist mill, the Plymouth Grist Mill. And this is located on the same site as a mill that was built in 1636 by John Jenny. Now, this is not the exact mill, of course. This is a reconstruction that was done in the 1970s, and it's not exactly like the original mill, but it is similar, and they still operate it much the way it was way back in the 17th century, including using a millstone that they acquired from a mill that was in Pennsylvania. And so it's an old millstone using the same process that they used back in those days, and it's really cool. They explain it all to you. They show you how it works. And if you come on a Saturday, which we are not here on a Saturday, but if you come on a Saturday, you can actually see them grinding the corn, and definitely worth a visit in Plymouth.